Today we'll cover Chapter 2, the Byzantine Empire, pages 40 to 57. That is the coverage of this entire chapter. And our lesson for today is the geography of the Byzantine Empire. Of course, to access our book, you need to go to our website, lodausd.net. And from there, you go launch Clever, and from Clever, Cengage, and from Cengage, log in your student account. And you will see our World History book, which is a National Geographic learning resources. And we'll cover Unit 1, Chapter 2, the Byzantine Empire, pages 40 to 57. And from Section 1, which is the Early Empire, and Lesson 1, the Geography of the Byzantine Empire, pages 42 to 43. Now let's go on to the chapter's essential question, or EQ. How did the Byzantine Empire carry on the culture and tradition of the old Roman Empire? And as for the lesson objective, identify the geographic features of the Byzantine Empire. Now, to better understand the geography of the Byzantine Empire, you need to know that the Bosphorus connects the Sea of Marmara with the Black Sea. It is also a form of dividing line between European and Asian section of Istanbul. The picture that I'm showing you is not in your book. So this is the Bosphorus connect. It is a strait connecting the Black Sea and the Sea of Marmara. It's about 18 miles or 29 kilometers long. Lining the Bosporus are villages, ancient towers, and summer homes. In the 18th and 19th century, various European nations sought to control the strait, and in 1923, the strait was internationalized. However, in 1936, the strait came under control of Turkey, and in 1973, the bridge across the Bosporus became the first southern link between Europe and Asia in almost 2,500 years. So that is a momentous or historical event connecting these two continents. So the Roman Empire fell in AD 476. But that's not the end of the story. For 1,000 years after that date, the glory of Rome lived in the Byzantine Empire. This is the eastern side of the empire. If you will remember, it was divided into two, the east and the west. So the main idea is that the Byzantine Empire was well located for trade, but open for attacks. So just like the old western side of the Roman Empire, from law to architecture, the Byzantine Empire's achievements were extraordinary. The reason for this is it's because of its strategic location. It's in the crossroad of Europe and Asia. It is a perfect place for business. It's a perfect place for trade routes from each continent, and a lot of merchants converge into these trade routes. So the Eastern Roman Empire became known as the Byzantine Empire because its capital was built on an old Greek town of Byzantium. In fact, the Byzantine Empire is often referred to as Byzantium by AD 330. So the Emperor Constantine had transformed Byzantium into a grand new Rome. He named the city Constantinople, or City of Constantine. Today it is called Istanbul. So basically at this point, the Western Roman Empire was destroyed. Although some historians will argue that it was not completely destroyed, but at this point, the glory that was Rome was long gone. So the eastern side, the Byzantine Empire, continued the traditions of Roman civilization for another 1,000 years, about 1,100 years. So most citizens of the eastern side of the Roman Empire do not call themselves Byzantinians or Byzantines. They call themselves Romans. A while ago, I mentioned about the Bosphorus Connect. At the heart of the empire was a small but important land link between Asia and Europe that permitted trade between east and west. So the empire itself reached into both continents. Today, we know this area, this place, as the country of Greece and Turkey. Well, of course, Greece was even more ancient than the Byzantine Empire itself. So, because of this geographic advantage, Constantinople and the Byzantine Empire grew rich on its trade. The city also attracted people from many parts of the world. Remember, it's connecting two continents. They came to trade goods from their homelands and wound up living in the bustling city. These immigrants gave Constantinople a cultural diversity or variety for which it was very famous. Now let's take a look at the map of the Byzantine Empire. So it is represented with two colors here. So the green one, the Byzantine Empire before Justinian, which we will discuss later. And the purple one is the expansion under Justinian. So at its height, it is so vast that it surrounded the Mediterranean Sea, covering areas from Egypt to Italy, and it basically means that it almost reconquered the areas or territories of the old Roman Empire. Well, of course, this geographic features is not just all advantages. There are problems as well. Although the capital Constantinople itself was well protected, the rest of the empire was surrounded by enemies. To the north and west were the barbarians, the barbarians that ransacked Rome, the western side. To the east was the old age enemy, the powerful hostile Persian Empire. Well, of course, the reason for these many enemies, of course, is its resources. So it will always boil down with the resources, economy, right? So the Byzantine Empire needed strong leadership to hold it together in the face of so many threats. Over 1,000 years, its border grew and shrank, depending on the ability of its rulers and the eagerness of its enemies to wage war. Because war is expensive. It looks cool on movies, but it's very expensive. At its greatest extent, the empire completely encircled the Mediterranean Sea, which I mentioned a while ago. Now, unlike the Western Roman Empire, the original, the old one, there are just very few or limited notable leaders in the Byzantine Empire. Justinian is definitely one of these notable leaders. So he was the emperor of the Byzantine Empire from AD 527 to 565. He not only recaptured the lost Byzantine lands, but also reconquered large areas of the old Roman Empire. His armies defeated the Persians and reconquered North Africa, Italy, and parts of Spain. For a brief time, Justinian reunited the Eastern and Western Roman empires. And I'm sure at that point, a lot of the Romans from the eastern side, the Byzantine Empire, thought that they will bring back the old glory of the Roman Empire. So he built up the strength of the Byzantine Empire even while Rome was being overrun by invaders. Justinian's legacy of leadership remained influential throughout the time of the Byzantine Empire and beyond. So that's the geography of the Byzantine Empire. Now let's go to the review and assess questions. The first one, reading check. Why was Constantinople's geographic location an advantage for trade or business? Number 2, analyze the cause and effect. What caused the Persian Empire and other enemies to attack or invade Byzantium? And number 3, interpret maps. How far west did the borders of the Byzantine Empire expand after Justinian's conquest? So you will look at the map, whether here in the video that I just presented in this recorded lesson, or you can go to your book to find the answer. There you have it, lesson 1.1 of chapter 2, the geography of the Byzantine Empire. Now go back to our Google Classroom and go ahead, open Review and Assess, Chapter 2, Section 1 and 2. So I put these two sections together because they are shorter compared to Chapter 1. write the title of the lesson, and then answer the questions that I just read a while ago. Now to Google Classroom and work independently and finish or answer the questions so that you don't have to worry about it later.